This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Again, Erev Yom Tif, Agityar. I want to share with you, today is Erev Yom Kippurim, and we know, aside from the fact that we're Mekayim the mitzvah of Vidoy on Yom Kippur, we're also Mizvadeh today, Mincha time. But aside from the Vidoy by Mincha, there may be another obligation on Vidoy before Yom Kippur begins. The Gemara in Yuma, Pezayin Mabei says, Tana Rabbanan, Mitzvahs Vidoy Erev Yom Kippurim Im Chashecha. Really, the mitzvah is to say Vidoy Erev Yom Kippur with dark. However, the Chachamim said you need to say Vidoy before you eat and drink, lest you get confounded during the meal, and you might not survive the meal, and then Chas v'Shalom to pass on before a Yom Kippur. So therefore, Chazal say that you should be mizvadeh before the meal in case you don't make it through the meal. And even if you said Vidoy before the meal, here's the clincher, here's the key line of this year. You should say Vidoy after you eat and drink. Shema ira dvar kalkala besuda, lest you do an avera during the meal. Says the Gemara, unless you do an avera during the meal, you need to say Vidoy after the meal. Now, the Gemara doesn't explain what it means, say Vidoy after the meal. Does it mean after the meal before Yom Kippur or after the meal in Maariv? And then the Gemara continues, V'yafal pisha yisvada arvis, even though you said Vidoy at night, yisvada shachris, say Vidoy again in the morning. So from here we see that there's a mitzvah of Vidoy in Erev Yom Kippur, and the Iker mitzvah should be Im Chashecha. The only thing is we're afraid you might not survive the meal, and therefore we're makdim to be mizvadeh before you eat. However, even though you've said Vidoy before the Suda, you should say Vidoy after. What does it mean, Achar sheyochel v'yishteh? What does it mean, say Vidoy after you eat? Comes the Rambam in Hilchos Shuvah, Parak Beis Halacha Zayin, and the Rambam says clearly this is going on the Vidoy that we say Yom Kippur and Maariv. The Rambam says, Mitzvahs Vidoy Yom Kippurim, that your maschil may erev hayom koydem sheyochel, Shema yechanek besuda, lest you choke, V'yafal pishas vada koydem sheyochel, Choyzer umezvada belele Yom Kippurim arvis, you say Vidoy again at night, and your Choyzer mezvada shachar. So the Rambam learns that aside from saying Vidoy in Mincha time, Erev Yom Kippur, we say Vidoy again in Maariv, and certainly this is what we all do. However, the Ramban in his Chidushim is matmiya greatly on the Rambam. The Rambam says, from the fact that the Gemara says the following lashon, Afal pi shesvada koydem sha'ochal, Yisvada la'achar sheyochal. Why doesn't the Gemara say Yisvada b'Maariv? Just like the Gemara says, Yisvada arvis, Yisvada shachris. So the Gemara should say, Afal bisha Yisvada koydem shachal, Yisvada arvis. Since later on the Gemara uses the lashon of arvis referring to the Vidoy of Maariv, if the Gemara in fact is now referring to the Vidoy of Maariv, it should say the same exact lashon. Says Ramban, Nireh she'ein havidoy shehu mizvada la'achar achila b'tefilas arvis. It is not referring to the Vidoy of Maariv. Why? Since it doesn't say v'yafal pi shesvada kodem sheyochel v'yishteh mizvada arvis. Says the Ramban, v'oid, when it says mitzvahs Vidoy erev Yom Kippur im chashecha, that means after you eat and drink. But the Chamar are makdimit kodem sheyachal. And on that, the Gemara is saying that even though you need to be makdim, the ikar havidoy is not mafsid v'tzarch lesvadois la'achar sha'achal josa im chashecha. That's how the brisa begins. You have to say vidoy im chashecha. Im chashecha does not mean in Maariv. It means before Maariv, while dark is coming. And therefore, so the Ramban is matmiya on the Rambam, and he says, Anan mitzvahs Vidoy shel erev Yom Kippurim ka'aminon dehu im chashecha, which refers to the Vidoy before Maariv. So we have a Machlokes Rishonim. Is one obligated to repeat the Vidoy after the meal before Yom Kippur? The Rambam says no. It's sufficient to say Vidoy in Maariv. The Ramban says yes. So how do we paskin? Are we makbid on the shita of the Ramban that one is obligated to say Vidoy before Yom Kippur, after the meal? So comes the Beis Yosef in Siman Tafresh Zayin, and the Beis Yosef says, "The ha'olam lo noagu k'divei Ramban." The minhag ha'olam is not like the Ramban. in Shulchan Aruch also, he doesn't say to follow the opinion of the Ramban. However, look in the Magen Avram, and that's Simon Sivkat Zayin. He brings in the name of the Shla, who says, Roi lahachmir lesvados achar achila, like the Shita of the Ramban. And actually, if you look up the Shla inside, he says, Afal pisha beis Yosef kasav ha'olam lo noagu kedivei Ramban, mikol makom ani oimer, says the Shla, hanoye kedivei haramban, hu minog toiv. One who follows the opinion of the Ramban, it is a correct minog, it is a good minog, v'yashar ba'inei elikim. And look in the Matei Ephraim, in Simon Tafresh Yotes of Katan Ches, who writes, Nachon sheterem knisas Yom Kippurim, it is correct before Yom Kippur comes in, yoimar balachash, the vidoi ashamnu. Meaning the Matei Ephraim says one should try to say ashamnu before the knisa of Yom Kippur, and says in the Nimukei Arachaim, that is the minhag of many kehillos. In the Tosfos Yom Kippurim, it's brought that even though the Beis Yosef says the minhag is not like the Ramban, but here in Yerushalayim, the minhag is to say a piyut compiled by the Ibn Ezra, composed by the Ibn Ezra. It's called Bikashti L'chakel Tishukasi, to be yotzei the shita of the Chiyuv Vidoy, the Ramban. And the Pri Chadash likewise says the minhag of the Sfardim is to say this piyut. Now, our minhag is we don't say ashamnu, we don't say l'cha elaket shukasi. So it seems like we are not noeg like the Ramban. However, look in the Mishnah Berurah, Simon Tafresh Zayin Sivkat Av. He writes that there are those who paskin that you need to say vidoy after achila, which is namely, he says in the Shartzi, and that's the Shita Ramban. V'roi lahachmer kedei yazu. It is correct to be machmer, says the Mishnah Berurah. And v'chein noagu bizmanenu she'omrim az Tefilas Zaka. Wow, says the Mishnah Berurah. That's the reason for Tefilas Zaka. The reason for Tefilas Zaka is to be able to be yotzei the Shita of the Ramban. And in fact, it would come out then, if you look in Tefilas Zaka, the vidoy that we say in Tefilas Zaka, which is what is known as Riboin Kol Olamim V'ata Lekad Lo Shamati L'Koilecha, that would be the ikar part of the Tefilas Zaka. And in fact, the Chai Adam also says the same thing, that Chai Adam says, I have compiled from the Kadmoinim a Tefillah B'Lashon Kal, which is a vidoy. Otherwise, according to many poskim, the mitzvah of vidoy is dafka before Yom Kippur. So it comes out, the Mishnah Berurah is saying that one should be machmir to try to be yotzei the Shita Ramban. And it also comes out that if somebody has very limited time and has, let's say, only a minute or two to say Tefilas Zaka, they should skip to the end to be able to say the Riboin Ha'olamim. So it comes out that me'ikar hadin, we don't paskin like the Ramban, but many achronim are choishesh, and most notably the Mishnah Berurah and the Chai Adam. And therefore, it would seem that it is most correct to try to at least come to shul at least 1 minute, 30 seconds before the Kol Nidrei to be able to say either the Riboin Ha'olamim or some type of Ashamnu. Now, in the beautiful Sefer Yarch L'Mayadim of Rabbi Rucham Olshin and Simon Lamates, written by my Yedid, Rav Moshe Gruen, he brings an interesting ha'ara, and that is, if in fact that the reason why we say in Tefilas Zaka, Riboin Ha'olamim, is to be yotzei the mitzvah of vidoy, l'chayra, one needs to be standing to fulfill the mitzvah of vidoy. In fact, look in the Pri Chadash. Pri Chadash says that regarding the period of l'chayra, Keli Tishukasi, one needs to be standing, because in order to be mekayim the inyan of vidoy, according to Ramban, one has to be standing for the fulfillment of vidoy. Likewise, in the Sefer Mishmeres Yomim Leiram, Soif Siman Lamed Hey, he brings that if you want to be mekayim the mitzvah of the Ramban and say vidoy before Yom Kippur, you need to be in a standing position, which is somewhat questionable, because even though maybe the minhag ha'olam is to say the Tefilas Zaka, it is certainly not the minhag ha'olam to be saying it in a standing position. Why would that be? Well, it could be, when it comes to the mitzvah of vidoy, the Vilna Gaon's opinion is that one must say vidoy before the Yiyul Ratzon, because if you say vidoy after the Yiyul Ratzon, then it's not being said in Shemona Esrei anymore. No? Nor Vasdem, so what if it's not being said in Shemona Esrei? Why do we incorporate vidoy as part of the tefillah? Vidoy is not a tefillah, but the answer is that if you look in the Lashon of the Rambam, the Rambam says in the mitzvah of vidoy, tzarech lehisvadois lefnei Hashem. You need to say vidoy before Hashem. Shkayach before Hashem. Then before whom? Why does the Rambam have to add the words lefnei hakel baruch hu? The answer is that vidoy is not only a mere confession, but it's in a way a form of a prayer where you're engaged in the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, where you come and behold the countenance of Hashem, and in that experience, you confess your Averos. Vidoy is not just putting on tefillin, a Maisa Mitzvah. It is in the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That being said, it could be that particular Nakuda of Vidoy is only required in the Vidoy of Yom Kippur itself, suggests Rabbi Ruchma Oshen. However, the Vidoy of Erev Yom Kippur is merely a Vidoy of Tshuva alone. And perhaps that does not require the extra degree of Lefnei Hashem, hence it does not require the Amida. But be it as it may, the upshot is Machlokes Rishonim whether one in fact is required to say Vidoy before Yom Kippur after the Suda. Me'ikar Adin, one does not, but it is correct to try to fulfill the opinion of the Ramban. As the Mishnah Berurah, the Chayadim, and the Matei Ephraim point out, at the very least one should try to say some type of Shamnu before Yom Kippur after the Suda. Wishing everyone a good bench to Yar Gemar Chasima Toiva. May all your tefillas be neskabel b'rachamim u'v'ratzon.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.